The faces in the boardroom turned toward me with that mixture of pity and awkward discomfort that signals the end of a career. I stood frozen mid-sentence, my presentation on the massive display behind me showing 3 years of my research, the breakthrough that was supposed to secure our company's future. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Veda," Brielle said, not sounding sorry at all, as she strode in wearing a cream suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ellis's daughter had perfect timing as always, but there's been a change of plan. I watched her glide to the front of the room while my body went numb, fingers still hovering over my clicker. The 6 investors, who minutes earlier had been nodding along to my presentation, now straightened in their chairs, their attention completely redirected. "My father asked me to share some exciting news," Brielle continued, not even glancing my way. "We've developed an alternative approach that shows significantly better market potential." My throat closed as she pulled up her own presentation, effortlessly minimizing mine with a casual gesture that seemed to mirror what she was doing to my entire existence. The room's attention shifted completely as my work disappeared from view. "We don't need your ideas anymore," she said to me, her voice low enough that only I could hear as she passed by, then louder, to the room. "Veda's work laid important groundwork, but we're taking a more innovative direction." I stood there, invisible now, as she showed slides that looked suspiciously like concepts I'd discussed during late nights in the lab. Concepts I'd never formally presented but had written in my personal notebooks. Concepts that somehow now belonged to her. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Kieran, our lead investor, actually stood up. "This is exactly what we hope to see," he said, beaming at Brielle. "Much more commercially viable." I packed my laptop with mechanical movements as they discussed funding rounds and expansion plans. Nobody noticed when I slipped my keycard out of my wallet and placed it on the table. I caught Ellis's eye as I headed for the door. The CEO who'd once told me I was the future of his company now looked through me like I was already gone. "Enjoy the funding," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. It was only when I reached my car that the shaking started. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. 3 years of work, my innovation, my future, and most crushing of all, they didn't even need me to explain it. Brielle had studied my work closely enough to present it as her own. I drove home in a daze, already calculating what I needed to withdraw before Ellis realized what I'd done. I had 48 hours at most. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and I promise the revenge coming up is worth sticking around for. Drop a comment about what you think Veda should do next. I love reading your theories. My name is Veda. I'm not what most people picture when they think scientific innovator. I don't have advanced degrees from prestigious universities or family connections in the industry. What I do have is an almost supernatural ability to see patterns others miss, and the stubborn persistence to follow them to their conclusion. I grew up watching my mother clean other people's homes, studying at whatever desk or table was available in whatever apartment we could afford that month. I clawed my way through college on scholarships and waitressing tips. When most students were sleeping, I was in labs, assisting on research that never bore my name. Ellis hired me 4 years ago despite my unconventional background, or perhaps because of it. "Fresh perspectives create breakthroughs," he'd said during my interview, seeming genuinely impressed by my self-taught approach to molecular biology. For 3 years, I worked 16-hour days developing a method to stabilize volatile compounds that could revolutionize how we deliver targeted medications to the body. It wasn't just a job, it was my life's work, the innovation that would finally prove I belonged. I never saw Brielle coming. She arrived 8 months ago, fresh from some European business school, installed in the corner office with a made-up title, Strategic Innovation Director. Ellis introduced her with proud father eyes, telling us all how lucky we were to have her fresh perspective. I tried to be welcoming. I shared my research when she asked questions, explained my methodology when she seemed interested. I thought she genuinely wanted to learn. "You're brilliant, Veda," she told me once, leaning against my workstation. "But you don't understand how this industry actually works." I didn't realize those words were both a warning and a threat. The meeting with investors had been scheduled for months, my chance to present directly to the people who controlled our future funding. Ellis had personally told me to prepare, had reviewed my slides, had nodded with satisfaction at the results I presented. Then, 3 days before the meeting, Brielle started asking more detailed questions. She insisted on seeing my latest lab notebooks. She wanted to understand the commercial applications more clearly. I opened the door to my apartment now, tossing my keys onto the counter and staring at the emptiness. My cat, Newton, rubbed against my ankles, sensing my distress. I picked him up, burying my face in his fur as the reality crashed over me. She hadn't just stolen my presentation, she'd stolen my future. By this time tomorrow, Ellis would realize what I'd withdrawn, and then the real chaos would begin. My phone buzzed with a text from Zara, my closest friend at the lab. What happened? Everyone's talking, but nobody knows anything. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How do you explain having your life's work ripped away? How do you admit you've just walked away from everything you've built? Before I could decide, another message appeared. This one from Ellis himself. We need to talk. Now. I turned off my phone and opened my laptop instead. There was work to do. The next morning dawned with the artificial calm that precedes a storm. I showered, dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, and prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. My laptop contained everything I needed, the proof that would either save me or destroy us all. When I arrived at the research park, the security guard waved me through with a confused expression. Thought you quit yesterday, he said. Not officially, I answered with a smile that felt like broken glass on my lips. The lab was buzzing with unusual energy when I walked in. Conversations stopped as I passed. Colleagues avoided eye contact. I walked directly to my station and began gathering my personal items, ignoring the whispers that followed me. Zara appeared at my side, her voice low and urgent. Ellis has been looking for you since yesterday afternoon. He's ballistic. What did you do? I carefully placed my coffee mug in my bag. Nothing he didn't deserve. Veda, this isn't like you. Tell me what's happening. Before I could answer, Ellis's voice boomed across the lab. Veda, my office. Now. The walk to his office felt like crossing a battlefield. Every eye tracked my movement, waiting for the explosion. Ellis stood in his doorway, face flushed with anger, his designer suit somehow making him look more desperate rather than powerful. Close the door, he barked when I entered. I did so carefully, then stood waiting. I wouldn't sit unless invited, a small act of defiance that I knew would register with him. Where is it? He demanded. I tilted my head slightly. Where is what, exactly? Don't play games with me. You know exactly what's missing. The investors are arriving in an hour to finalize everything, and suddenly we can't access the core stabilization process, the one you were responsible for. I let his words hang in the air between us, enjoying the way his certainty began to crack in the face of my silence. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, I said finally. According to yesterday's meeting, you're going with Brielle's concept instead. My ideas aren't needed anymore. Ellis's face darkened. Her concept relies on your stabilization process, which is suddenly incomplete in our systems. What did you remove? I smiled then, the kind of smile that comes from knowing you hold all the cards, while your opponent has just realized they've been bluffing with nothing. I didn't remove anything from company systems, Ellis. That would be unethical, and possibly illegal. Then explain to me why we can't replicate your results this morning. The investors are expecting a demonstration in 60 minutes. The door opened behind me, and Brielle swept in, her confidence from yesterday replaced with barely contained panic. Daddy, the lab team can't. She stopped short when she saw me. What is she doing here? I turned to face her, maintaining my calm. I came to collect my things, since you made it clear yesterday that my ideas aren't needed anymore. Brielle looked from me to her father and back again. You did something. We can't get the stabilization process to work. That's unfortunate, I said, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. Have you tried following your own innovative approach? The one you presented yesterday? The color drained from her face. You know, I was building on your work. Did I? That wasn't mentioned in your presentation. In fact, I believe you specifically said you'd developed an alternative approach. Ellis stepped forward. Enough games. The investors will be here soon. Fix this, and we can discuss compensation, a promotion, whatever you want. I looked at him directly. I'm afraid I can't help you, Ellis. As I said, I didn't remove anything from company systems. Everything I developed while employed here remains intact. Then why isn't it working? Brielle hissed. I checked my watch deliberately. Perhaps because science requires understanding, not just slides and buzzwords. I moved toward the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting of my own to attend. Ellis moved to block my path. You're not going anywhere until you fix this. I kept my expression neutral as I looked up at Ellis. Are you physically preventing me from leaving? Because that would create a whole different set of problems for you. The implied threat hung between us. Ellis was many things: ruthless, calculating, privileged, but he wasn't stupid. After a moment, he stepped aside. His jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear his teeth cracking. "This isn't over," he said. "Actually, it is," I replied, walking past him. "I quit yesterday, remember? When your daughter announced that my ideas weren't needed anymore." I felt their stares burning into my back as I walked through the lab. Colleagues who had been whispering minutes earlier now watched in stunned silence. Most would never dare to stand up to Ellis. His reputation for crushing opposition was legendary. As I reached the main door, Brielle's voice rang out, high and strained. "She sabotaged us. She must have." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see the expressions to know the damage was spreading. Doubt, confusion, fear. The investors would arrive to find chaos instead of confidence. The perfect presentation Brielle had delivered yesterday would crumble when they asked for demonstrations. Outside, I took my first deep breath since entering the building. The morning air felt cleansing after the suffocating tension. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, and a text from Zara. What just happened? I got into my car but didn't start it immediately. Instead, I watched the main entrance, waiting. 5 minutes later, Kieran arrived with 2 other investors. Their expensive cars and confident strides spoke of people accustomed to being catered to. They had no idea they were walking into a disaster. Another 10 minutes passed before my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. This time, I answered. Veda speaking. "This is Kieran Walsh." His voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk." "I'm listening. Not over the phone. Where are you?" I looked at the glass building gleaming in the morning sun. "Close by." "Meet me at the coffee shop across the street. 5 minutes." He hung up without waiting for my response. I smiled at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Right on schedule. When I entered the coffee shop, Kieran was already seated in a corner booth, as far from other customers as possible. His normally immaculate appearance showed signs of strain, tie slightly askew, a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. I ordered a coffee before joining him, taking my time, establishing control of the interaction through unhurried movements. "What happened in there?" he demanded, when I finally sat down. I sipped my coffee. "You'll have to be more specific. Don't play games, Veda. Yesterday, Brielle presents a revolutionary stabilization process. Today, nobody can make it work, and Ellis looks like he's about to have a stroke. That sounds stressful for them." Kieran leaned forward. 6 investors are ready to commit $80 million in funding, but not if this is smoke and mirrors. I nodded thoughtfully. Interesting dilemma. "What do you want?" He was direct now, recognizing negotiation when he saw it. "Want to fix this. To make the process work, like it did in all the preliminary reports we reviewed. I'm not employed there anymore. That can change." He pulled out his phone, scrolling briefly. "Your salary was what, $110,000? We can triple that, plus stock options." I shook my head. "You're negotiating for the wrong company, Kieran." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not interested in going back to work for Ellis." "Then what do you want?" I took another sip, letting him wait for my answer. "You're investing in a specific innovation, correct? A molecular stabilization process that allows for targeted delivery with minimal degradation?" "Yes." "And you've verified that this process works? That it's reproducible?" He shifted uncomfortably. The preliminary data was compelling, but this morning, suddenly nobody can make it work. I said, "Doesn't that concern you?" "It would concern me more if I didn't think you were behind it somehow." I smiled. "That's quite an accusation. Am I wrong?" "Let me ask you something, Kieran. In yesterday's presentation, who did Brielle say developed this process?" He frowned, thinking back. "She presented it as the company's innovation, her team's work." "Her team." I nodded slowly. "Interesting." His expression changed as understanding dawned. "You're saying..." "I'm saying you should be very careful about where you put $80 million. I stood up, leaving my coffee half finished. Especially when the person presenting can't actually deliver what they're selling. "Wait." Kieran reached for my arm, but stopped short of touching me. We need to continue this conversation. I agree, but not here, and not now. I handed him a business card, blank, except for a phone number. Call this number at 3 p.m. today, if you're interested in seeing what actually works. I left him sitting there, staring at the card in his hand. By the time I returned to my apartment, my phone was lighting up with messages. The lab was in complete disarray. Technicians couldn't replicate results that had been consistent for months. Brielle was blaming faulty equipment. Ellis was threatening everyone with termination if they didn't fix it. Zara texted, Ellis just fired Darren for suggesting the process might be flawed. What is happening? What is happening? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began preparing for my 3 p.m. meeting. Everything needed to be perfect. At 2:30, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera, surprised to see Ellis standing there, alone. His car idled at the curb, no driver visible. He'd come himself. I considered ignoring him but decided against it. This confrontation was inevitable. When I opened the door, he looked older than he had that morning. The powerful CEO was showing cracks. May I come in? His voice lacked its usual commanding tone. I stepped aside, allowing him entry, but saying nothing. He glanced around my modest apartment, taking in the stacks of scientific journals, the small desk cluttered with notes, the cat watching warily from atop a bookshelf. The investors walked out, he said finally. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. There was no anger in his voice now, just exhaustion. You planned this. I planned nothing, Ellis. I simply quit, after being publicly humiliated and having my work stolen. He winced at my directness. Brielle was overzealous. She shouldn't have presented without acknowledging your contributions. Contributions? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. That's an interesting way to describe creating the entire process. We can fix this, he said, moving to sit on my sofa without invitation. Come back. Full credit. Higher position. Name your terms. I studied him, this man who had once represented opportunity to me. Why would I trust you now? Why would I trust you now? Because without you, we lose everything. The company, the funding, everything we've built. You mean everything I built while you took the credit? He flinched but didn't deny it. What do you want, Veda? I want you to leave. Be reasonable. We both lose if you. No, Ellis. Only you lose. I glanced at my watch. I have a meeting to prepare for. His face darkened. With who? That's not your concern anymore. He stood, anger replacing fatigue. You can't take our research to competitors. Everything you developed belongs to the company. I didn't take anything that belongs to the company, Ellis. I promise you that. His eyes narrowed. Then why can't we make it work? I opened the door, indicating our conversation was over, perhaps because science is complex, and not everything can be stolen with a flashy presentation. As he stepped toward the door, his phone rang. He checked it, his expression shifting from anger to concern. We're not finished, he said, answering the call as he walked out. I closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment. My hands trembled slightly. Confrontation had never been my strength, but I was beyond caring about comfort now. At 3 p.m., exactly, my phone rang. Hello, Kieran, I answered. Have you decided if you're interested in seeing something that actually works? I'm listening, he replied, but I'm not alone. Who's with you? The entire investment group. After this morning's situation, we need certainty. I smiled to myself. Text me the address. I'll bring everything you need to see. 2 hours later, I stood before 6 of the industry's most powerful investors in a private conference room at their downtown offices. No Ellis, no Brielle, just me and the work I'd dedicated years to perfecting. Before I begin, I said, setting up my equipment, I want to be clear about something. What you're about to see belongs to me, not to Ellis's company. Kieran leaned forward. That contradicts what we were told yesterday. I imagine many things you were told yesterday won't hold up to scrutiny. I launched into my presentation, explaining the true methodology behind the stabilization process. I demonstrated the results with samples I'd prepared, allowing them to verify the efficacy themselves. When I finished, the room was silent for several seconds. Finally, Kieran spoke. This is remarkable work, Veda, but it raises serious questions about what happened at Ellis's company. I can answer those questions, I said. But first, I need to know if you're interested in funding the actual innovation, not just a presentation about it. Another investor, Amara, spoke up. Are you saying you've established your own company? I have. As of 3 weeks ago. Kieran's eyebrows rose. 3 weeks? Before yesterday's presentation? I nodded. I sensed which way the wind was blowing. And the process? The intellectual property? Belongs to me personally. Developed through independent research. Conducted outside company hours. Using my own resources. Ellis will fight that claim, Amara said. Let him try, I replied, sliding a folder across the table. This contains documentation of every step I took to protect my work, verified by independent legal counsel. Kieran opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing interest. You've been planning this for months. I've been protecting myself for months, I corrected. There's a difference. And what exactly happened this morning? Amara asked. Why couldn't their lab replicate the results? I met her gaze steadily. Because they never fully understood the process to begin with. They had my results, but not my methodology. Brielle saw the destination, but not the path. That's devastating for them, Kieran said slowly. Yes, I agreed. It is. The investors exchanged glances, a silent conversation happening above the polished conference table. I remained standing, calm despite the butterflies in my stomach. This moment would determine everything. We need to discuss this privately, Kieran finally said. I nodded, gathering my materials. Of course. No, Amara interrupted, raising her hand. Stay, please. I have more questions. I paused, caught between the impulse to give them space and the need to maintain momentum. Your documentation shows you developed this innovation independently, she continued, tapping the folder. But you were employed by Ellis during this time. Most contracts have clauses about intellectual property. Mine did as well, I acknowledged, which is why I was careful to develop the critical components on my own time, with my own equipment. The lab results they have show a version that works, but not the refined process I've developed since realizing what was happening. And when was that exactly? Another investor asked. When Brielle arrived, I said simply. She asked too many specific questions, spent too much time examining my notes, rather than understanding the science. After the second time I caught her going through my desk after hours, I created a separate research path. Kieran's eyebrows shot up. You have proof of that? I nodded. Security footage. I requested it, claiming I'd misplaced some notes. The cameras caught her at my workstation at 10:30 p.m. on 3 separate occasions when I wasn't present. The room went quiet again. I could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. Not just financial ones, but reputational. Nobody wanted to back a company built on stolen research. What exactly are you proposing? Kieran finally asked. My company, Solara Therapeutics, is seeking investment to bring this stabilization process to market. We're small, but focused. No bloated management structure, no nepotism, just scientists who understand what we're building. And your team is? Currently 4 people, including myself, all experts who left Ellis's company in the past year due to. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Leadership concerns. Amara nodded slowly. You've been planning your exit strategy for some time. I've been protecting my work. I corrected again. The exit became necessary when it became clear my contributions wouldn't be respected or acknowledged. One of the quieter investors leaned forward. What makes your process different from what we saw yesterday? In layman's terms. I appreciated the question. This was my element, the science itself, not the politics around it. Imagine trying to deliver medicine to a specific part of the body. Traditional methods are like throwing darts blindfolded. Some might hit the target, but most scatter elsewhere, causing side effects. My process creates what you might call a guided missile system. The medication remains stable until it reaches exactly where it's needed, then activates precisely. And the applications? Cancer treatment initially, delivering chemotherapy directly to tumors without damaging surrounding tissue. Eventually, the platform could work for neurological conditions, autoimmune disorders, anywhere we need targeted treatment. The energy in the room shifted. This wasn't just about corporate drama anymore. It was about potential that transcended it. We need to verify your claims independently, Kieran said, his voice carrying new respect. I welcome that, I replied. In the meantime, Amara added, I suggest we pause our discussions with Ellis's company. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions. As I packed my presentation materials, Kieran approached me privately. Ellis called me 6 times today, he said quietly. I continued organizing my papers, That's unfortunate. He claims you stole research. That would be projection on his part. Kieran studied me for a moment. You knew this would happen. All of it. I met his gaze. I knew what kind of people I was dealing with. The rest was just paying attention. As I left the building, my phone vibrated with a text from Zara. Total meltdown happening. Ellis firing people left and right. Brielle locked herself in the bathroom crying. What did you do? I didn't respond. Some things were better explained in person. When I reached my car, another message appeared. This one from Ellis himself. This isn't over. You've made a serious mistake. I stared at the words, feeling not fear, but a strange calm. The threat was expected, predictable, like everything else about Ellis when you understood what motivated him. That evening, I met Zara at a quiet restaurant across town, away from anyone who might recognize us. She arrived looking exhausted, her lab coat exchanged for a sweater that couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders. I've never seen anything like today, she said immediately, not even waiting to sit down. Ellis completely lost it. He threw a chair through his office window. Is everyone okay? Physically? Yes. Professionally? Half the senior staff resigned on the spot. The rest are updating their resumes. She leaned in. The investors pulled out completely. All of them. I nodded, unsurprised. You did something, she continued, studying my face. You know exactly what happened. I protected myself and my work. How? I smiled slightly. By understanding people's motivations. Ellis wants status and control. Brielle wants to prove herself to her father without doing the work. The investors want a return without risk. And you? What do you want? Recognition for what I built, and never to feel as powerless as I did in that boardroom. Zara sat back. You're starting your own company, aren't you? Already started. 3 weeks ago. Her eyes widened. Before the presentation? I saw where things were heading. She hesitated. Is there room for another scientist? I thought you'd never ask. The next morning, my lawyer called with news. Ellis had filed an emergency injunction, trying to block me from using his research. The judge had denied it based on the documentation I'd provided weeks earlier. He's floundering, my lawyer explained, making desperate moves without proper preparation. Will there be more legal challenges? Almost certainly, but we're prepared for them. Your foresight in documenting everything independently was crucial. By afternoon, industry blogs were buzzing with rumors. Ellis's company stock had dropped 15%. Board members were calling emergency meetings, and through carefully cultivated contacts, I learned that Brielle had been quietly removed from her position. I didn't feel the joy I'd expected. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, the vacuum that follows when something that consumed you suddenly evaporates. That evening, as I worked late in my small but growing lab space, the security system alerted me to a visitor. The camera showed Brielle standing outside, looking nothing like the confident woman who had interrupted my presentation. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her clothing rumpled, her posture defeated. Against my better judgment, I buzzed her in. She entered cautiously, glancing around the modest space with surprise. This is it? This is what destroyed us? You destroyed yourselves, I replied. I just refused to go down with you. She sank into the nearest chair without waiting for an invitation. My father won't speak to me. The board removed me this morning. Her voice held no tears, just disbelief. Everything's gone. What did you expect would happen when you stole someone else's research without understanding it? I didn't steal it, she insisted automatically, then stopped herself. I adapted it, improved the presentation. Science isn't about presentations, Brielle. It's about truth, about putting in the hours to understand complex systems. There are no shortcuts. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw past the privileged exterior to the insecurity beneath. How did you do it? How did you know what would happen? I paid attention to details, to patterns, to people. While you were studying my notes, I was studying you. She winced at the directness. The investors are talking to you now, aren't they? I nodded. They won't invest in my father's company even if I'm gone? The damage is done. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to restore. She stood suddenly. I didn't come here for sympathy. I came to understand what happened. Now you do. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. You planned all of this from the beginning. No, I corrected. I simply created options for myself, while you and your father eliminated yours. After she left, I sat alone in the lab, surrounded by the equipment I'd purchased with my own savings. The space was small compared to Ellis's state-of-the-art facility, but it was mine. Every beaker, every centrifuge, every microscope represented a choice to bet on myself when no one else would. 48 hours after Brielle interrupted my presentation, everything had changed. Ellis's company was in freefall. The investors were negotiating with me instead, and the research that might help countless patients would continue under my direction. The revenge wasn't in destroying Ellis or humiliating Brielle. It was in proving they had never been necessary to begin with. My phone rang. Kieran, again. The boards finalized their decision, he said without preamble. We're prepared to offer initial funding of $60 million, with performance-based additions that could take it to 100. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. There's something else, he continued. Ellis is being removed as CEO. The board's lost confidence. I see. They're asking about you as a possible replacement. I laughed, genuinely surprised. I'm flattered, but no, I'm building something of my own now. I thought you might say that. Worth asking, though. When we hung up, I walked through the quiet lab, running my fingers over equipment that represented not just scientific tools, but freedom. The freedom to work on my own terms, to be recognized for my contributions, to never again stand silently while someone else took credit for my life's work. The next morning, a courier delivered a package to my apartment. Inside was a lab notebook, my original one, the one that had disappeared from my desk months earlier. A small note accompanied it, written in Ellis's distinctive handwriting. You've won. Was it worth it? I closed the notebook, feeling the weight of years of work in my hands. Was it worth it? The question lingered as I prepared for my day, for investor meetings, for the beginning of something new. The answer came later that afternoon when I walked into our expanded lab space, where Zara and 2 other scientists were already setting up equipment. They looked up as I entered, their faces showing something I'd rarely seen directed at me in Ellis's company: respect. Ready to change the world? I asked. Their answering smiles told me everything I needed to know. Yes, it was worth it. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice served. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who tried to take credit for your work? Share your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about tearing others down. It's about building yourself up to heights they never imagined you could reach.